Ladies and gentlemen, Your Honor, counselors. My name is Jason Lewis, and I know that we were introduced briefly yesterday during the jury selection process. I wanted to introduce myself again. My co-counsel is Carrie Morrissey, who most of you spoke to, at least in some, to some degree yesterday. Also at counsel table is Shad Bowe. He is our IT specialist, and Corporal Alexander Hancock. She is what's called our case agent, and she is a witness who you will be hearing from later, maybe later today, if not certainly by tomorrow. As the judge mentioned earlier, it is Ms. Morrissey's and mine responsibility to prove to your all satisfaction that Ms. Gutierrez committed the two crimes with which she's been charged beyond a reasonable doubt. The two crimes she's been charged with are involuntary manslaughter and tampering with evidence. This morning, I hope to give you a roadmap of what we intend to introduce throughout the trial. And although the statements that I'm making this morning aren't evidence and you can't consider what I'm saying for purposes of your deliberations, I hope to give you a preview of what the evidence is about, what witnesses you're going to be hearing from, and again, kind of highlight some of the key pieces of evidence that we think we're going to be showing you throughout the trial. But most importantly, what we want to do is give you the information that you need to answer two key questions. The first being, what are the events that happened on the set of Rust that led to the death of Hannah Hutchins? And the second question is, how did live ammunition end up on the set of the movie? As to both questions, we believe that it was the negligent acts and failures of the defendant, Ms. Gutierrez, that resulted in both the acts that contributed to Ms. Hutchins' death and to the live rounds being brought onto the set. A bit later on, I'm going to explain to you exactly how we believe that happened. Give me just a minute. I'm going to put some images up on the screen for you guys, but there's a little process we have to go through to get that going. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Hannah Hutchins. This is the victim in the case that we're here to deal with this morning. Ms. Hutchins was born in Ukraine on April 9th, 1979. She was married, her husband's name is Matthew, and she has one son who was 9 years old at the time of her death. As a child, Ms. Hutchins lived on a Russian military base located in the Arctic. She took an early and keen interest in film and journalism. She studied both economics and journalism at the Kiev National University, where she received a degree in international journalism. Ms. Hutchins met her husband Matthew when she was working in the United States in Los Angeles, California. They hit it off so well that they eventually got married. And when Ms. Hutchins moved and immigrated into the United States, she continued her education, and she eventually earned a master's degree in 2015 from the American Film Institute Conservatory. While in Los Angeles, Ms. Hutchins transitioned into the film and television industry, working as a cinematographer. This was a job that she loved and she had a great passion for. For those of you, I'm sorry.
No, just speak up.
Okay, I apologize. My microphone has been off this whole time and I didn't know. For those of you who may not know, a cinematographer is a person who works behind the scenes on a film, and the cinematographer is responsible for creating the overall vision of the film. In very basic terms, the cinematographer decides how the movie will be lit and colored, and how the final footage will appear on the screen when you watch the movie. And in fact, Miss Hutchins was working as a cinematographer for the movie Rust, which when she was tragically shot and killed on October 21st, 2021. By all accounts, from the folks who knew her and worked with her, and many of those you will be hearing from, she was a gifted and talented artist, but above all, she was a loving wife and mother. And like Miss Hutchins, the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, was also a behind-the-scenes member of the Rust crew. Ms. Gutierrez was hired to perform a dual role on the movie. She was hired to be both an armorer and a props assistant. As a props assistant, it was Ms. Gutierrez's primary duty to essentially go out and source and bring back to the film set everything that the actors need to touch as part of making the movie. So for example, if they're doing a kitchen scene, then Ms. Gutierrez would have gone out, purchased plates, cups, glasses, forks, all of that sort of stuff, and then those would have been incorporated into the set. Ms. Gutierrez's other role was as the movie's armorer, and it's that role that really has brought us here today. The armorer has a few key responsibilities. The first responsibility is to source and bring to the set all of the firearms that are going to be used as part of the movie. So for a modern movie, that may have required her to purchase or obtain machine guns, semi-automatic handguns, long rifles, and that sort of thing. But for a Western like Rust, the armorer would have to source weapons that were in use at the time so that the movie looks more authentic. And so that would include finding old-looking revolvers and shotguns and things of that nature. I've just put up a photo. This is the firearm that Mr. Baldwin was using in this movie. This is also the firearm that was used in the incident that resulted in the death of Ms. Hutchins. One of the things that I think it's important for you all to understand is that throughout this trial, we all may refer to these type of firearms as prop guns, but make no mistake, they are legitimate firearms. If you put a live bullet inside of these guns, they will fire. So we sometimes refer to them as prop weapons, but they are absolutely capable of causing a projectile to fly out of the barrel. The other thing that it's important for you all to know is that although this particular weapon looks old, it is actually a brand new gun. This gun was purchased directly from the manufacturer for the purpose of being used in this movie. And although it looks old, it's not a gun that has had hundreds or thousands of rounds put through it. It was a brand new and perfectly functioning gun when it arrived on the set. The second thing that the armorer is responsible for is sourcing and purchasing blank and dummy ammunition. You're going to be hearing a lot throughout this trial about the differences between live ammunition, blank ammunition, dummy ammunition. So I'm just going to kind of give you a 10,000 foot overview of what this stuff is. The image that's on your screen right now is what's called a blank round. A blank round is actually pretty easy to distinguish because it has that crimped end where normally a bullet would be. The reason that blanks are used in the movie is because when it's in the gun and an actor pulls the trigger, there is enough gunpowder inside of that blank to cause a pop and have a cloud of smoke come out from the gun, but it doesn't have a projectile that shoots through the barrel of the gun. So these are a type of round that is used frequently on the movie sets, especially whenever they want to make it look like the actor is actually firing a weapon. The second type of round that is used on the sets are what's called dummy rounds. And these are a different story. Dummies look exactly like real bullets. As you can tell from kind of that main image there, although this evidence dummy round has some writing on it, you wouldn't be able to distinguish that from a live bullet if you were just looking at it with your eyes. And because these dummy rounds are designed to look exactly like live ammunition, every round has to be thoroughly checked before it is put inside of one of these firearms. Aside from sourcing firearms, blanks, and dummies for the movie, the next major function that Hannah was required to do on the movie set is that she was required to check every single one of these rounds to make sure that it's the appropriate blank or dummy and not live ammunition before it gets inserted into the gun. And there are two primary ways that an armorer or anybody who's familiar with this can check to make sure that a round is a dummy round. The first thing they can do is shake it, and if you'll see in that on the lower right hand side, I've got a photograph for you there of a plastic container that's got 3 BBs in it. Those BBs are inside of that dummy round so that whenever you shake it, you can audibly hear that it's making a noise, and that way you know it's a dummy round. Sometimes they have a little spring in there rather than these bullets, but they always have some sort of noisemaker in there. The other way to distinguish a dummy from a real live bullet is in that top right photograph, and you'll see that that cartridge has a hole drilled into the side of the casing. That's the second way that you can distinguish a dummy round from a live round. And then we have, not to overcomplicate things, but I think it's important that you know this, we also have some dummy rounds that are missing what's called the primer. Normally on a live cartridge, there's an explosive element that is inside of that center portion that whenever the hammer of the gun hits that primer, it causes a small spark that then ignites the rest of the gunpowder in the bullet and causes the projectile to be expelled. So dummy rounds, as you can see, they do look an awful lot like live ammunition, but there are ways, if you are careful, that you can distinguish a dummy round from a live round. The next major function of the armorer is to check the firearm before it is brought onto the set. And there's a very specific process that is used for this. When it's time for a firearm to be used, the armorer is required to present the firearm to the first assistant director to double check that only dummy rounds are inside the gun. And the armorer is also supposed to offer the actor who is receiving the gun the opportunity to also have the gun inspected in front of them. Unfortunately, in this case, Ms. Gutierrez did not always adhere to these safety procedures, and you're going to hear from several witnesses who will testify that she often rushed through this critical step and sometimes she skipped this check altogether. So let's turn to what happened on October 21st, 2021. The cast and crew of the Rust film We're out at the Bonanza Creek Ranch, which is a ranch located just outside the city limits of Santa Fe. It's several thousand acres large, and it has an Old West style town that's built there, and often movies are filmed there. And I've got an example photo here just to kind of give you an idea of what the set looks like. It's nothing particularly fancy. It's just an Old West looking town. Part of the set, and this is located a little bit a ways from the town itself, is this church. And it was at this church that the incident resulting in Miss Hutchins' death occurred. The evidence is going to show that on October 21st, it was a fairly chaotic day on the set of the movie. The evening before, a group of camera operators who had some concerns about various safety issues on set sent an email to the production team indicating that they were going to be quitting. And so the next day, in response to this notice, the producers decided to push ahead with filming anyway, and they decided to use less camera equipment than what was normally used, and they tried to just improvise and make do with what they had. Filming on the morning of the 21st was largely uneventful. The cast and crew filmed several scenes without any particular incidents occurring. Leading up to the lunch hour, a small group of cast and crew were inside the church working on getting some close-up shots of Alec Baldwin sitting on a church pew and manipulating his revolver. That scene was completed just before lunch, and so they called for a lunch break. And let me back up just a little bit. Before the lunch break was called, I want you all to see what was going on. This is so that gives you an idea of what was going on that morning. Alec Baldwin was sitting on a church pew, and he was practicing this draw from his holster with the camera crew kind of close up on top of him. So they completed that scene, and they called for the lunch hour to occur. So during the lunch hour, Ms. Gutierrez took the gun from Mr. Baldwin, and she took it back to the safe, the gun safe that was loaded on a prop cart. Once lunch was over, the production decided that they wanted to continue working inside of the church. But at this point, they weren't actually filming anything like they were in this video that I just showed you. And instead, they were doing what's called a blocking. And that is, in film terms, what you do before you even get to a rehearsal. So it's like a very rough rehearsal where the lighting director, the camera operator, and all of the folks are trying to get things situated so that they can then move into a rehearsal. Whenever a blocking is going on, because they aren't filming, there's really no need for the actor to have a live firearm in their hands, or even for the live firearm to yet be on set. You're going to hear from several witnesses, or from one witness in particular, who's going to testify that for purposes of blocking, Mr. Baldwin could have been using a stick, a rubber gun, anything that would essentially allow him to mimic a gun. It didn't have to be a live firearm. On that day, though, the defendant was asked to provide Mr. Baldwin with a live firearm for the blocking, and she did, and that was within her discretion to do so. You're going to hear that on the day of the shooting, Ms. Gutierrez loaded the gun in the morning with 5 rounds. The revolver, though, is a 6-shooter, so it can hold 6 rounds, but in that morning, she only was able to load 5 of them. After the lunch break was over,